Chalo, we can start.
Are you announcing or should I say the page number?
I've already announced, Shimangla.
What do you think of this image? Pablo asked. I don't know, I said. It seemed to be logically connected to what we were talking about. Do you remember what we were talking about? Yes, I was asking about Marjorie. You don't think there is a connection between Marjorie and your thought? Not an obvious link I can think of. What about a hidden link? I can't see a connection. How could escaping be related to Marjorie? Do you think she escaped? He looked thoughtful. Your thought was of you escaping. Oh, yeah, that's right, I said. Maybe I'm going to escape without her. I looked at him. Maybe I'm going to escape with her. That would be my guess, he said. But where is she? I don't know. We finished eating without talking. I was hungry, but the food seemed too heavy. For some reason, I felt tired and sluggish. My hunger left me quickly. I noticed Pablo wasn't eating either. I think we should go back to the cell, Pablo said. I nodded and he motioned for the soldier to take us back. When we arrived, I stretched out on my cot and Pablo sat looking at me. Your
Okay, now over here, we have to understand that Pablo is very sensitive. Okay, so he's actually sensing the energy and he's sensing what is the right thing for the hero to do. But the hero is not yet sensitive enough to actually start sensing it.
your energy seems down, he said. It is, I replied. I'm not sure what is wrong. Are you trying to take in energy? He asked. I guess I haven't, I replied, and that food doesn't help. But you don't need much food if you're taking everything in. He swept his arm in front of him to emphasize everything.
Okay, so now what does this imply? The point here is that when we are in appreciation, when we are connected with the flow, then the requirement of food comes down. We do not need to eat as much food. You will find that highly spiritual people eat very little, but the grosser people, they need to eat more. You understand? So as you get spiritually or intellectually evolved, your requirement of food starts to come down because you take energy from other things.
I know it's hard for me to get the love flowing in a situation like this. He looked at me quizzically. But not to do so is to harm yourself. What do you mean? Your body is vibrating at a certain level. If you let your energy get too low, your body suffers. That is the relationship between stress and disease. Love is the way we keep our vibration up. It keeps us healthy. It is that important.
Okay, so now over here, this becomes extremely important. Okay, we are vibrating at a certain frequency. Now, that particular frequency, which is related to health, is the frequency that we need to be vibrating at. Disease can only come into the body when the frequency of vibration gets lower. This we can see in the biofield imaging also. Wherever there is stress, the color red starts coming in, and wherever there is brightness, that means that the energy is high in that area of the body system. So whenever there is a problem in the body, the vibration in that area starts to slow down, which is why disease comes into the body. So if we don't maintain our energetic levels, that we can start falling sick.
Give me a few minutes, I said. I practiced the method Father Sanchez had taught me. Immediately, I felt better. The objects around me stood out with presence. I closed my eyes and concentrated on the feeling. That's good, he said. I opened my eyes and saw him smiling broadly at me. His face and body were still boyish and immature, but his eyes now seemed full of wisdom.
So now, when you look at it, as the hero raised his vibratory level, he could start perceiving more. So his level of perception started to change when he raised his energy level. Now he can see wisdom in the eyes of Palbo, which he was not being able to see previously, because you notice what is vibrating at your frequency level. So if you raise your vibratory frequency, then you will start noticing what is vibrating at your frequency. Again, it's a matter of resonance. Okay, so we constantly need to keep our energy up and keep our vibratory frequency up if we are wanting to connect to something which is vibrating at a higher frequency.
I can see the energy coming into you, he said. I could detect a slight field of green around Pablo's body. The new flowers he had placed in the vase on the table seemed radiant. To grasp the seventh insight and truly enter the movement of evolution, he said, one must pull all the insights into one way of being.
So now what does this mean? All the insights that were going on. So, like, first feeling the restlessness, then looking at the coincidences taking place, looking at your history, what was the history of the entire world, then understanding that everything is made out of energy. The next thing is that how we are always wanting to grab energy. Then the next level was how we go into the control dramas. Okay. Then how do we give energy to another person? And then how do we see the energy which is there? Now, if you want to go into a higher vibratory frequency, all these need to be merged. You need to start jacking into the flow. You need to start seeing the coincidences. You need to start giving the love. You need to be aware of your control dramas. Okay. You need to understand what your history is and why are you in the place that you are there. So what are the lessons you need to learn? All that needs to be integrated if you want to start actually vibrating at a higher frequency.
I didn't say anything. Can you sum up how the world has changed for you as a result of the insights? I thought for a moment. I guess I've woken up and seen the world as a mysterious place that provides everything we need if we get clear and get on the path.
Now, this is a beautiful one, right? The world is as a mysterious place that provides everything that we need. So, literally speaking, whatever we need for our growth, whatever we need for our spiritual well being, is being provided by the universe to us. We just have to start becoming aware of it.
Then what happens? He asked. Then we're ready to begin the evolutionary flow. And how do we engage in this process? I thought for a moment. By keeping our current life questions firmly in mind, I said, and then watching for direction, either in a dream or in an intuitive thought or in the way the environment illuminates and jumps out at us.
So, again, we need to understand what is our ultimate aim in this lifetime. Where are we heading? So again, the question is, why are we here? Okay. And that can only come to you when you intuitively get it. No logic can give you that. Okay. Now, what happens here is that the more aware we become, the more present we become, the more careful we are in observing what is happening all around us, what is lighting up, which is the direction I must take. If I have two ideas, which one lights up more for us? We start becoming aware, and intuitively we will be guided to the right direction. Even if we do not know where it is taking us, but if we allow the flow to enter our system, we will be taken to the correct place.
I paused again, trying to pull the whole insight together, then added, we build our energy and center ourselves in our situations, in the questions we have. Then we receive some form of intuitive guidance, an idea of where to go and what to do. And then coincidences occur to allow us to move in that direction.
So now what does this mean? Stilling the mind, right? Now, what happens in the excursion workshop? We just conducted a workshop yesterday. I don't know if anyone is here who has actually done the workshop yesterday, but you will understand that your mind totally gets still. Is anyone here who did the workshop yesterday?
Yes, me, Aisha.
Yeah, Aisha, will you just share your experience with everyone?
Uh, it was very profound, the workshop. It was thoroughly enjoyable. That's another issue. But it went step by step, deeper and deeper, and gave us so many different tools that we could use to reach a state of calmness in the mind.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's the thing that I was looking for. A stillness in the mind.
yeah.
Is your mind still very still, Aisha, from yesterday?
There have been moments of agitation, but I would say yes, more or less.
More or less, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
now what is he talking about in this paragraph, right?
I've also been very aware of the agitation. So
Exactly.
I'm able to control myself and say, okay, now enough. This is pointlessly, it's a waste of time. Move on. Yeah.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
so we build up our energy and center ourselves in our situation. So what does this imply? We bring ourselves into the present. That can only happen if your mind is still. If there's chatter going on in your mind, then you are either in the future or in the past. Okay, so stilling the mind, making your mind go still is very important if we want to jack into the flow. Okay, and then when the mind is still, when a stimulus is coming in through our senses into that still mind, we can actually perceive the vibrations. We can feel the changes which are happening, the gentle changes which are happening, and make ourselves aware. So if we have a dream, or we just feel something coming in, a sense of knowing starts to seep in. Okay, and then we also start becoming aware of what is happening with us. As Aisha said, that it's not that I'm not getting agitated, but I'm aware that I'm getting agitated. Now previously what would have happened, she would have been agitated, not out of awareness, not working out of awareness, a witness attitude. Okay, so this becomes very important over here if we are wanting to really connect into the flow. So stilling the mind, making the mind still, being aware of the stimulus coming in, and then acting on it. That's the name of the game.
Yes, yes, Pablo said. That is the way. And each time that these coincidences lead us into something new, we grow. We become fuller persons existing at a higher vibration.
Now, this again becomes important here. Coincidences, right? Now, when we are in the flow, the coincidences will come, leading us into from the known into the unknown. Now, where does growth take place? What you know, you already know. If you want to grow, you have to step into the unknown. And when you get intuitive insight, it becomes easier to step into the unknown. So, when we are stepping into the unknown, through coincidences, something will just pop up in your life, and then you take that opportunity. When you take that opportunity, that is when the growth actually occurs.
He was leaning towards me, and I noticed the incredible energy around him. He was beaming, no longer appearing shy or even young. He seemed full of power.
So now as the hero's energy level went up, he starts noticing the energy level of Palbo also. Okay, so again, you can only observe the energy if you are tending to vibrate at the same energetic field. So that's the reason why you need company. What is the company you keep becomes extremely important. If people in your company, in your surrounding are vibrating at a lower energy field, then that is where you will be taken into. If people around you are vibrating at a higher energy field, that is where you will be taken. So it's very important to notice what is the company that you keep.
Pablo, what has happened to you? I asked. Compared to when I first met you, you seem more confident and knowledgeable and full somehow. He laughed. When you first came, I had allowed my energy to dissipate. At first, I thought that you might be able to help me with my energy flow. But I realize that you haven't learned to do this yet. That ability is learned in the eighth insight. I was puzzled. What was it that I didn't do? You must learn that all the answers that mysteriously come to us really come from other people. Think about all that you have learned since you have been in Peru. Haven't all the answers come to you through the actions of other people you mysteriously met?
So again, answers can come to us in various ways. Okay. Now, it can come to us mainly from meeting other people, talking to other people, attending to other people. It can also come from other knowledge, from books, from the TV, from videos, etc., etc. But when it comes from a person, it is more alive. That is why the culture was so important, because the guru used to transmute the energy to the child according to the requirement of the child. If you pick up a book, then you are reading it according to your energy and the understanding is not there fully. But if you have a guru to explain it to you, it becomes much more alive. Okay, so it's very important to understand what people are telling you.
I thought about it. He was right. I had met just the right people at just the right time. Charlene, Dobson, Will, Dale, Marjorie, Phil, Renew, Father Sanchez, and Father Carl, now Pablo. Even the manuscript was written by a person, Pablo said. But not all the people you meet will have the energy or the clarity to reveal the message they have for you. You must help them by sending them energy, he paused. You told me of learning to project your energy towards a plant by focusing on its beauty, remember?
Right.
Yes.
So now over here, he says very clearly, you must help them by sending them energy. So again, it's a win-win. Always we are looking at a win-win. When we send energy to someone, they get energized and then they can give us the message. Okay. So it's very important to attempt to energize people around you. Rather than pulling them down and having a crab mentality, we must look at how we can prop the people up around us. There's this story about this person who used to grow the best pumpkins or the best watermelons in a farm. Now, what this guy used to do every year, he used to have, I think it came in one of the books, every year he used to have a watermelon eating competition. And he used to always save his best and biggest watermelons for that competition. The only criteria was that when you ate the watermelon, you had to spit out the seeds in a way that they were saved. And what he used to ultimately do is that he used to use those very seeds to actually plant his new crop. Now, what was happening? That means that every year, the crop that he was planting was made out of the best possible seeds of the biggest watermelons. And the other thing he started doing was he even started distributing his seeds to the farms near and around him. So what was that doing? Now the flowers, when the flowers are getting pollinated, the bees are not only pollinating with his farm, they're also getting pollen from the neighboring farms. So what was he doing? He was helping his other farmers, his neighbors, which resulted in his crop also becoming much better. Okay, so they were helping each other. Then he died and his sons came in, and his sons felt that why should we give the best watermelons? I can get a better price for the big watermelons, and they started giving the smaller watermelons for the competition. So now what happened? Ultimately, all the product also depreciated. So the more we help people around us, the more we support people around us to grow, the more we also grow. So he very clearly says over here, yeah, where are we? Yeah,
You must help them by
yeah.
sending
So
energy.
he very clearly says you must help them by sending energy. Okay, so we must help each other. That is why we are here. If we support each other in our growth, all of us will grow. But if we want to grow individually with a selfish intent, then we find that we also restrict our growth and restrict the growth of all the people around us. This is again what something in the Gita is also coming, that one of the characteristics of a self-realized person is that that person is not selfish, okay, and is giving. So this totally agrees with that concept.
Well, you do exactly the same thing towards a person. When the energy goes into them, it helps them see their truth. Then they can give this truth to you. Father Costus is an example. He continued. He had an important message for you which you did not help him reveal. You tried to demand answers from him, and that created a competition between you and him for energy. When he felt that, his childhood drama, his intimidator, took over the conversation.
Now this is also very interesting here. Okay. So now someone needs to come and give you an information, but if you get hobby on him, then his, your shackles go up, your walls go up, your protective gear goes up, and then you don't have a proper conversation. But if a person feels that you're loving, you're giving to that person, you're opening up to that person, there's no reservation, then that person also tends to open up in front of you.
What was I supposed to have said? I asked. Pablo didn't answer. Again, we heard someone at the cell door. Father Costus entered. He nodded at Pablo, a slight smile on his face. Pablo smiled broadly, as if he actually liked the priest. Father Costus shifted his gaze to me, his face becoming stern. Anxiety gripped my stomach.
Okay, so now again over here, when you smile at a person, what happens? Generally speaking, the person will smile back at you. And I've been trying this all over the place when I'm traveling, etc. We are sitting in the airport, I'll just smile at people. And I'm seeing, always I see that they'll smile back. Now, when you're smiling, if you're angry and you're annoyed, vis-a-vis if you're smiling, or you're just sitting bored and vis-a-vis you're smiling, where is the energy level higher? I'm sure that when you're smiling, the energy is higher. So the more we can smile at each other, the more we can actually, send energy to each other, the more uplifted we become.
Cardinal Sebastian has asked to see you, he said. You will be transported to Iquitos this afternoon. I would advise you to answer all his questions. Why does he want me? I asked. Because the truck you were caught with belongs to one of our priests. We are assuming you received your copies of the manuscript from him. For one of our own priests to disregard the law is very serious. He looked at me with determination. I glanced at Pablo, who nodded for me to continue. You think that the manuscript is undermining your religion? I asked Kostus gently. He looked at me with condescension. Not just our religion, everyone's religion. Do you think there is no plan for this world? God is in control. He assigns our destiny. Our job is to obey the laws set forth by God. Evolution is a myth. God creates the future the way He wants it. To say humans can make themselves evolve takes the will of God out of the picture. It allows people to be selfish and separate. They think that their evolution is the important thing, not God's plan. They will treat each other even worse than they do now.
So what is happening over here? This is basically the fear of the church, that the authority will be taken away from the church which is playing up. Because at that time, the church was the representative of God. And whatever the church said, God said. Now, if people start to think that they can evolve on their own, then the authority will, that basic thought will undermine the authority of the church.
I couldn't think of another question. The priest looked at me for a moment, then said, almost kindly, I hope you will cooperate with Cardinal Sebastian.
So now, In the previous paragraph, this guy was looking at him very sternly. Now, as the hero started sending him energy, his demur cooled down and he literally was kind in speaking to the hero. So, the way that you act automatically will reflect in the energy field of the other person.
He turned and looked at Pablo, obviously proud of the way he had handled my questions. Pablo only smiled at him and nodded again. The priest walked out and a soldier locked the door behind them. Pablo leaned forward on his cot and beamed at me, his demeanor still completely transformed, confidence on his face. I looked at him for a moment, then smiled. What do you think happened just now? He asked. I struggled for humor. I found out I'm in more trouble than I thought. He laughed. What else occurred? I'm not sure what you're getting at. What were your questions when you arrived here? I wanted to find Marjorie and Will. Well, you found one of them. What was your other question? I had a sense that the priests were against the manuscript, not out of malice, but because they misunderstood. I wanted to know what they are thinking. For some reason, I had the idea they could be talked out of their opposition. After saying this, I suddenly understood what Pablo was leading to. I had met Costos here now so that I could find out what bothered him about the manuscript.
So, again, over here, what is happening? Coincidences, right? Now, if we start listening to our intuition and we start operating out of awareness, we will find that one thing will lead to the other. But the only point is that we need to operate out of awareness. We need to be aware that what is coming into our life and then grab it. The idea of saying yes to what is coming in is extremely important. When we start saying no, that is when we go into resistance and we jack out of the flow. When we start saying yes, that is when we jack into the flow.
And what was the message you received? He asked. The message? Yes, the message. I looked at him. It's the idea of participating in evolution that bothers them, isn't it? Yes, he said.
So now what is happening here? That basically what the church is stuck with is that they want to keep the authority. So anyone evolving without their authority becomes a problem for them.
That would figure, I added. The idea of physical evolution is bad enough. But to extend the idea to everyday life, to the individual decisions we make, to history itself, that's unacceptable. They think humans will run amok with this evolution, that relations between people will degenerate. No wonder they want to see the manuscript suppressed. Could you convince them otherwise? Pablo asked. No, I mean, I don't know enough myself. What, it, what would it take for someone to be able to convince them? One would have to know the truth. One would have to know how humans would be treating each other if everyone was following the insights and evolving.
So now what does this mean? This means that you getting the insight or the like it's like prediction as to what will happen, and that can only happen when you're jacked in. Everything what I have seen is a probability, nothing is a surety. But when you are looking at predicting something, all these people who are forecasters, who are predictors, they are looking at possible realities that are going to manifest. Okay, now the more tuned in you are, the more tuned in you can be into the possible reality. But for that, your energy level has to be at a higher level, or you need to be downloading a lot of data to be able to actually start predicting. So, naturally, over here, he's saying very clearly that they have a fear, and who can take care of the fear? A person who has actually seen the future, or has observed the future, or is knowledgeable about the future and how a certain action will pan out. Now, if you look at theoretical physicists like Einstein, what they used to do was they used to do the experiment in their head. So the experiment was physically not possible, but they did the experiment in their head and they wrote down the entire theorem that, okay, if this happens, this will happen. If this happens, this will happen. And they put it down on paper. Now, it was not provable, but what they were doing was they were actually doing it in their head. So what were they doing? They were predicting or they were projecting into the future as to what the result of their experiment would be, right? But most of them, if you really see, were going into an altered state of consciousness to do it, to be able to download the data. So this is what he's saying here, is that when someone could go into the future to see the results of the experiment which is being done, only then that person could explain it to them.
Pablo appeared pleased. What? I asked, smiling along with him. How humans will act towards each other in the very next insight. Sorry. How humans will act towards each other is in the very next insight, the eighth. Your question of why the priests were against the manuscript has been answered, and the answer in turn has evolved into another question. Yes, I said, deep in thought. I've got to find the eighth. I've got to get out of here. Don't go too fast, Pablo cautioned. You must make sure you fully grasp the seventh before you go further. Do you think I grasp it? I asked. Am I staying in the flow of evolution? You will, he said, if you remember to keep your questions always in mind. Even people who are still unaware can stumble into answers and see coincidences in retrospect. The seventh insight occurs when we can see the answers as they arrive. It heightens everyday experience.
So what does this imply? That you are constantly aware. Okay, you're constantly open to actually observing what is happening around you and what is the next step that you need to take to get to your ultimate goal. Okay, and in my view, the ultimate goal is transcension, is self-realization. So anything that can take you to that goal and you're open to it will automatically slowly start chugging you towards that goal.
We must assume every event has significance and contains a message that somehow pertains to our questions. This especially applies to what we used to call bad things. The seventh insight says that the challenge is to find the silver lining in every event, no matter how negative. You first thought that being captured had ruined everything, but now you can see that you were supposed to be here. This is where your answers were.
So again, we come back to the same proposition that nothing happens for nothing. Everything has a deeper meaning behind what is happening. So there is order within the chaos. This is what the chaos theory is all about. That when you feel from a closer view that everything is going in, everything is going, offline, and everything is having a total chaotic thing around it. When you look at it from a higher perspective, you will start seeing that there is order in the chaos. Okay, now nothing is happening for without a reason. So the more you can find the reason why something is happening and find what is good in whatever is happening, you will be able to shift from the left side of the grid to the right side of the grid. When you think everything is falling apart, you're on the left side of the grid. But when you put a silver lining to it, you automatically shift into the right side of the grid. So what is happening here? Anything that is happening to you, find something to appreciate and be grateful for in that particular incident. It will automatically shift you and put you into the uplifting current.
He was right, but if I was receiving answers here and evolving to a higher level, then Pablo must certainly be doing the same thing. Suddenly, we heard someone coming down the hall. Pablo looked directly at me, a serious look on his face. Listen, he said. Remember what I told you? The eighth insight is next for you. It is about an interpersonal ethic, a way of treating other people so more messages are shared. But remember not to go too fast. Stay centered in your situation. What are your questions?
So now, again, this becomes very important. Okay. He's repeating over and over again, don't go too fast. So everything happens in at one step at a time. If we want to evolve too fast, it becomes a problem because ultimately you will collapse because the foundation of the growth has not been created. I find this when we take the aura pictures of people, there is a combination of the color. There is a combination which comes on the left side, on the right side of the picture, which is a combination of green and yellow. When I see that combination, I know that this person has a tremendously good pickup capacity. They pick up things very fast. But what happens is that they don't go into depth. So in the long run, they tend to collapse because they've not created a solid foundation for themselves. So in the same way over here, he's saying, and he's cautioning the hero that don't want to go too fast. Take it one step at a time. Become aware of stuff. Integrate stuff before you are starting to move. Yeah. Create this known. Okay, now like a child, we read it in Magical Child also. The child moves away from the mother, but always comes back to the mother. Then again moves a little further from the mother, then comes back into near the mother. Then he moves further and he's looking at the mother, whether the mother is there or not. So what are we doing? We are from a solid foundation, we are going out and exploring the unknown. But this foundation needs to be solid. That's why we need to take it one step at a time.
I want to find out where Will is, I said. And I want to find the eighth insight. And I want to find Marjorie. And what was your guiding intuition concerning Marjorie? I thought for a moment that I would escape, that we would escape. We could hear someone right outside the door. Did I bring you a message? I asked Pablo hurriedly. Of course, he said. When you arrived, I didn't know why I was here. I knew it had something to do with the communicating the seventh insight, but I doubted my ability. I didn't think that I knew enough. Because of you, he continued, I now know that I can. That was one of the messages that you brought to me.
So now, again, we have messages for each other. We are constantly building each other up, provided we are open to allow ourselves to be built up.
Was there another? Yes. Your intuition that the priest can be convinced to accept the manuscript is a message for me also. It makes me think I'm here to convince Father Costus. As he finished speaking, a soldier opened the door and motioned for me. I looked at Pablo. I want to tell you one of the concepts the next insight talks about, he said. The soldier glared at him and took my arm, ushering me out the door and closing it. As I was led away, Pablo stared through the bars. The eighth insight warns against something, he called out. It warns against your growth being stopped. It happens when you become addicted to another person.
So now, again, when a person transcends, the person can get stuck because of three things. I've repeated this previously also. You can get stuck to a person, you can get stuck to a place, you can get stuck to a thing. Okay. So now over here he says when you become addicted to another person. Now, if you can't release the other person, then automatically you get stuck to that particular person. And then your growth, your expansion in consciousness gets stuck. So that's how the ghosts and all that form, right? Now, this can happen in our life also. If we get addicted and stuck to someone, something, or some place, our growth will also get restricted. So we have to become aware that we are not addicted to something. Otherwise, it will create problems in our life.
The interpersonal ethic. I followed the soldier up the steps and out of into the bright sunshine. Pablo's warning was echoing in my head. Addiction to another person? What did he mean by that? What kind of addiction?
Okay, so now when you look at it, the spiritual addiction is also a very big problem. Okay, now if you get addicted to a guru, again it becomes a problem. And any person who wants their student to be addicted to them is creating a problem for himself also, because that story which comes out, there is a person who is holding a rope leading the cow. Okay, now does the cow have him or does he have the cow, becomes the question. Now, if the guy owns the cow and he's leading the cow, that he is as much tethered to the cow as the cow is tethered to him. Okay, so true freedom comes when you're really not addicted to anything. You have freedom to do what you want.
The soldier led me down the path towards the parking area where two other soldiers stood beside a military jeep. They watched us intensely as we walked their way. When I was close enough to see inside the jeep, I noticed that a passenger was already sitting in the back. Marjorie. She looked pale and anxious. Before I could catch her eye, the soldier behind me grabbed my arm and directed me into the seat beside her. Two other soldiers climbed into the front seats. The one sitting on the driver's side glanced back at us briefly, then he started the vehicle and headed north. Do you speak English? I asked the soldiers. The soldier in the passenger seat, a beefy man, looked at me blankly and said something in Spanish that I couldn't understand, then turned curtly away. I turned my attention to Marjorie. Are you all right? I asked in a whisper. I, Her voice faded and I noticed tears were flowing down her face. It's going to be okay, I said, putting my arm around her. She looked up at me, forcing a smile, then rested her head on my shoulder. A ripple of passion filled my body.
So now, what was Palbot indicating to him? That you could get stuck to a person, right? So he has the issue that he may get stuck to Marjorie.
For an hour, we bounced along the unpaved road. Outside, the landscape grew continuously more lush and jungle like. Then, around one bend, the dense vegetation opened up into what appeared to be a small town. Wood frame buildings lined both sides of the road. 100 yards ahead, a large truck blocked the way. Several soldiers motioned for us to stop. Beyond them were other vehicles, some with flashing yellow lights. I became more alert. As we pulled to a stop, one of the soldiers outside walked up and said something I couldn't understand. The only word I recognized was gasoline. Our escorts left the jeep and stood outside talking with the other soldiers. They glanced at us occasionally, weapons at their side. I noticed a small street which angled to the left. As I looked at the shops and doorways, something changed in my perception. The shapes and colors of the buildings suddenly stood out and became more distinct.
So now what happened here? Suddenly he went into heightened perception and that gully started to brighten up. Now, as soon as something starts to brighten up and you are in the flow, that thing is telling you something.
I whispered Marjorie's name and felt her look up. But before she could say anything, an enormous explosion rocked the jeep. A blast of fire and light shot up from the area in front of us, and the soldiers were blown to the ground. Immediately, our vision was obscured by smoke and falling ash. Come on, I yelled, pulling Marjorie from the vehicle. Amid the confusion, we ran down the street in the direction I had been looking. Behind us, I could hear distant shouts and moans. Still engulfed with smoke, we ran perhaps 50 yards. Suddenly, I noticed a doorway to the left. In here, I shouted. The door was open and we both ran inside. I fell against the door, closing it securely. When I turned around, I saw a middle aged woman staring at us. We had dashed into someone's home. As I looked at her, attempting a smile, I noticed that the woman's expression was not one of horror nor anger at having had two strangers rush into her house after an explosion. Instead, what she displayed was an amused half smile that looked more like resignation, as though she half expected us and now had to do something. On a chair nearby was a small child about 4 years old. Hurry, she said in English. They will be looking for you. She ushered us to the back of the sparsely furnished living room, through a hall and down some wooden steps to a long cellar. The child walked at her side. We moved quickly through the cellar and up some other steps to an outside door leading to an alley. The woman unlocked a small compact car which was parked there and hurried us inside. She directed us to lie down in the back seat, threw a blanket over us, and pulled away in what seemed to be a northerly direction. Through it all, I remained speechless, carried along by the woman's initiative. A rush of energy filled my body as I fully realized what had happened. My intuition of escape had occurred.
So again, in his intuition also, he had seen a gully and they were running through that gully, right? So that actually started to manifest.
Marjorie lay beside me, her eyes tightly closed. Are you all right? I whispered. She looked up at me with tearful eyes and nodded. After about 15 minutes, the woman said, I think you can sit up now. I pushed away the blanket and looked around. We seemed to be on the same road as before the explosion, only further north. Who are you? I asked. She turned and looked at me with her half smile. She was a shapely woman of about 40 with shoulder length dark hair. I'm Carla Dees, she said. This is my daughter, Maretta. The child was smiling and looking over the passenger seat at us with large, inquisitive eyes. Her hair was jet black and also long. I told them who we were, then asked, how did you know to help us? Carla's smile grew wider. You are running from the soldiers because of the manuscript, aren't you? Yes, but how did you know? I know the manuscript too. Where are you taking us? I asked. I don't know that, she said. You will have to help me. I glanced at Marjorie. She was watching me closely as I spoke. Right now, I don't know where to go, I said. Before I was captured, I was trying to get to Iquitos. Why did you want to go there? She asked. I'm trying to find a friend. He is looking for the ninth insight. That is a dangerous thing. I know. We will take you there, won't we, Maretta? The little girl giggled and said with a sophistication beyond her years, Of course. What kind of explosion was that back there? I asked. I think it was a gas truck. She answered. Earlier, an accident had occurred, a leak. I was still amazed at how quickly Carla had decided to help us, so I decided to press the question. How did you know we were running from the soldiers? She took a deep breath. Yesterday, many military trucks were passing through the village going north. This is unusual and it made me think of the time 2 months ago when my friends were taken away. My friends and I studied the manuscript together. We were the only ones in this village who had all 8 insights. Then the soldiers came and took my friends. I have not heard from them.
So now, another coincidence where they have met a woman who knows all the 8 insights and he is looking for really understanding the eighth insight.
As I watched the trucks yesterday, she continued, I knew the soldiers were continuing to hunt copies of the manuscript and that others, like my friends, would need help. I envisioned myself helping those people if I could. Of course, I suspected that it was meaningful that I was having that particular thought at that particular time. So when you came into my house, I was not surprised.
So now, what is happening here? She is aware of her thoughts, which is something that all of us must be aware of. What are we thinking? Are we aware of them or they are just coming? So the point becomes that when we start thinking with awareness, That is when the magic starts to happen.
She paused, then asked, "Have you ever experienced this?" "Yes," I said. Carla slowed the car. Ahead was crossroads. "I think we should turn to the right here," she said. "It will take longer, but it will be safer." As Carla turned the car to the right, Loretta slid to the left and had to hold on to the seat to keep from falling over. She giggled. Marjorie was staring appreciatively at the little girl. "How old is Loretta?" Marjorie asked Carla. Carla looked disturbed, then said gently, "Please don't talk about her as if she wasn't here. If she was an adult, you would have addressed the question to her." "Oh, I'm sorry," Marjorie said. "I'm 5," Loretta said proudly. "Have you studied the eighth insight?" Carla asked. "No," Marjorie said. "I have only seen the third insight."
So now what happened here? This is something that we are all doing all the time, right? We don't speak properly to the children. अपने तुतला के बात करते हैं, right? So that's what even in the acupressure class, Manjushri ji was saying the same thing. When we speak to children, we must speak to them properly, not tutla ke. It may look very cute, but later on the same thing you are only going to criticize. So we need to speak to them properly and ask them also to speak properly, and we must address the children as if they understand what we are talking about. Okay, this becomes extremely important over here. Now, the other thing over here is that Marjorie was, even when in Vicient, Marjorie was stuck at the third insight, that how to project the energy. That is what she was stuck at. So, naturally, she has not progressed, whereas the hero has now progressed to the eighth insight.
"No," Marjorie said, "I have only seen the third insight." "I'm at the eighth," I said. "Do you have any copies?" "No," Carla said. "All the copies were taken away by the soldiers." Does the eighth insight talk about how to relate to children? Yes. It is about how humans will eventually learn to relate to each other. The talks of many things, such as how to project energies to others and how to avoid addictions to people. There was that warning again. I was about to ask Carla what it meant when Marjorie spoke. "Tell us about the eighth insight," she said. The eighth insight, Carla explained, is about using energy in a new way when relating to people in general. But it begins at the beginning, with children. "How should we view children?" I asked. "We should view them as they really are, as endpoints in evolution that lead us forward. But in order to evolve, they need our energy on a constant basis, unconditionally."
So, now here the key word is unconditionally, right? Even when we are dealing with our children, we are always creating a transaction with them rather than dealing with it unconditionally.
We should view them as they really are, as endpoints in evolution that lead us forward. But in order to learn to evolve, they need our energy on a constant basis, unconditionally. The worst thing that can be done to children is to drain their energy while correcting them. This is what creates control dramas in them, as you already know. But these learned manipulations on the child's part can be avoided if the adults give them all the energy they need, no matter what the situation. That is why they should always be included in conversations, especially conversations about them. And you should never take responsibility for more children than you can give attention to.
So, now again, what is the thing here? We need to be aware that the child is there in the room and also include the child in all the conversations. We need to give them energy to be able to take responsibility also to a certain extent for themselves. And we also must not take more responsibility than we can shoulder. This becomes extremely important. Today, most mothers are very, very, I mean, what do you say? They're making big mistakes by taking too much responsibility away from the child. For example, the homework that the child gets, the mothers make it their responsibility. They don't allow the child to take responsibility to do the homework. If the child doesn't do the homework and goes to school and gets a jhar, then there is where the growth and learning of the child will take place. Now, if you keep doing the homework for the child, that is what the child will learn. Now, when he grows up and he goes out, he will expect others to do his work for him or her rather than doing the work himself. I'm just giving one example. But this becomes very important when we are bringing up our children.
The manuscript says all this, I asked. Yes, she said, and the points about the number of children is highly stressed. I felt confused. Why is the number of children one has important? Should we stop here?
We can stop here. Okay, anyone, anything to say? I think it's really very powerful.